is an Unspoiled Network podcast.
This is Spoil Me, covering Six of Crows by Leigh Bardugo, chapters 1, 2, and 3. In these chapters, I am introduced to a strange new world where a race of people with magical powers is being enslaved by a bunch of normies, and they've been given a drug to enhance their powers, and it works a little too well. Oops-a-daisy. Welcome to Spoil Me. All right, welcome to the show, everyone. I am Natasha. This episode is brought to you by Jill, who sponsored the first 3 chapters. She had originally picked a different book that had been translated into English, and unfortunately, none of the translations are sold in any format in the United States. So sorry, Jill, about that. But she was prepared with something as a backup in case that were the case. So I'm here with Six of Crows, which when I announced that I was doing this in the patrons group, everybody was very excited. This is apparently a series that has a lot of fans, similar to So You Want to Be a Wizard. It's a lot of people who read it don't seem to like talk about it with others because they assume that it's not really mainstream enough for a lot of people to recognize it. But in the Unspoiled group, there's a lot of nerds, and it was a bunch of people going, oh my God, I love this book. Oh my God, did you read the other ones? I don't know if this is going to be a good enough background for you. You might be confused. Because apparently this is part of a series set in a world, and it is not the first. So folks were afraid that maybe I wouldn't be able to keep up with what's going on or the characters or, you know, it's not like a urban fantasy that's set in our world. It's a different world with different names for countries and whatnot. It feels in some ways to me as if it's our world with like some of the countries renamed and some of the culture like twisted a little bit, sort of like Golden Compass, where there are areas that just have slightly different names, but you can kind of recognize, oh, that's supposed to be Norway. Oh, that's supposed to be Germany. So for a moment, I was like, what's going on here? Because I always go into my Spoil Me assignments without looking up any background. I don't even read like the blurb from the back of the book. I don't like to do that because I feel like there's often a little giveaway that will ruin a bit of a thing for me. So I had some idea going into Six of Crows. I mean, from the name, from the cover, you get that it's going to be something like fantastical. But because everything that I've done so far has been sort of set in our universe, I was just expecting more of that. And I think this is the first one that's not, that I've done. And it's really, really well drawn. To the point that coming into it with this being the first book, I didn't feel at a loss at all. There was a few moments here and there where they would mention countries by name, or they would mention certain wars, or, you know, people with certain titles. But a lot of them are just a hair off from the way that, like, merchants, instead of merchants, they're merchers. Like, okay, I get it. And everything is sort of, feels like there's 6 layers of backstory and history to everything people talk about, even in terms of simple stuff like architecture. The second chapter, which is from the perspective of, is her name Inja? Inij. She's describing like the courtyard that they are meeting in. And, you know, there's a description of like, the office had one room of such and such, which all the offices have. That was standard. Like little throwaway comments like that really make it feel like there is history here that everybody knows, but it doesn't feel unnatural trying to bring the reader into that, which it can, you know, a writer with less skill you can see that they're trying to make the history easy, but it isn't, or it feels forced or contrived to work it into the conversation or into the character's line of thought. So I was really pleased after seeing that there were some concerns about whether I'd be able to like get into this without the history of the other books under my belt, that wasn't an issue for me at all. So let's start from the beginning here, because they do a beautiful little kind of, I'm calling this, even though it's the first chapter, it's not like a prologue. It feels like a George R.R. Martin prologue a little bit, because it's from the POV of a character who later winds up dead. So, you know, that's sort of one of his like fortes, and not that I'm trying to credit him with being the inventor of that, but there's no way for me to read something like this and see how it goes and not think of him, because he's the one that sort of introduced me to that idea, which I think is very effective. And I'm not trying to say that a writer is kind of copying by doing that. It's just, you know, a tactic to handle it. And frankly, because it isn't a prologue, because it's the first chapter, it got me off guard a little bit. And I didn't realize that Jost, who is the first POV character, was not going to be around for a while. So Jost, bless his heart, Jost is like the slightly more self-aware Percy Weasley. He's just trying too hard. He's ambitious, but not necessarily smart enough to like get himself where he wants to go. He has a weakness that is very perceptible to people around him, so he gets bullied right away. And he doesn't help the bullying by just straight up standing up for himself. He tries to like posture further in order to prove that he isn't worthy of the bullying. And it comes off as sort of, it's an imperiousness that feels, if anything, even weaker. And there's a moment where he actually hears in his voice how small and petty are the words he uses, he sounds, and hates it. So I liked that he can tell. It's not like, because Percy was this type of person, but didn't seem to be aware of it. And just seemed to be frustrated that people around him weren't at his level or couldn't seem to understand the importance of the things that he did. And Jost is more just kind of desperate for approval than Percy was. And he's in love with this girl. So he thinks. This is such a... So this girl's name is Anya. And this was the part immediately where I'm like, and guys in the, because I'm doing this live on Crowdcast as usual, folks in the chat, you may need to help me with some of the like vocabulary from this here and there. But I listened to the audiobook for these first three, and I know how to pronounce certain things. Gresha is, or Grisha, depending on how the narrator felt like saying it, is the race, I think, of people who this girl belongs to. And we find out later that there are 3 different sorts of like castes to that race. And she is a healer. And it's really just a crush. Like, she healed a bruise on his face. It was like a nothing thing, but his commanding officer did not like for him to look like a thug. And so she heals him, and he thanks her, and she smiles at him, and her smile just does him in. And now he is obsessively going and saying hi to her, and everyone is aware of this enormous crush that he has. And he's trying to have like some dignity, but it's really too late. So he goes over to the place that she stays. And this is where we find out exactly what the situation is. She basically lives in a dorm with other Greshas who are indentured servants. Now, this might be something that the history would tell me, or maybe I will find out later on in the book. But I'm going to posit a theory based on what I'm kind of understanding from this so far. Because the thing that I couldn't understand, he goes and he speaks to this dude to try and find out where she is. And he just doesn't feel like not only does he not feel like cooperating, but he doesn't like Jost specifically. And Rutger that's his coworker. Retvenko is the one that is not feeling cooperative today. Retvenko is able to make Jost go flying out the door and slam the door in his face with just a movement of his hand. And so this begs the question to me, they're indentured servants who are basically slaves, but if he's able to do things like that, why are they able to be caught the way that they are? And so I feel like, based on the things that I've heard throughout these first 3 chapters, that a lot of them are refugees, if I'm not mistaken. And obviously, as we see in a little bit, if you give them more power, maybe they won't be indentured anymore. Maybe that's not how this is going to work out after all. But yeah, so even the help, the Grisha are like a strange combination. They are servants, they are indentured, they are property, but also they are incredibly valuable. And obviously, if you have powers like that, yeah, you would be, for a number of reasons. So he can't exactly, Jost can't really retaliate in a way that would be satisfying without maybe getting himself in trouble. It's sort of like, a superior's kids. Like, they're getting into something they shouldn't be doing. They're in the office in a place they shouldn't be. You see them fucking shit up, but also you kind of can't really. So just gets thrown out the door. The door slams and window pane breaks, and he says that's going to be added to your indenture because he has no other recourse. So his buddy Rutger comes over and tells him to, first of all, just tell them what to do. You are being really ridiculous asking them nicely when we are in charge. And then says all of us guards are wanted at the boathouse. So he had been unable to find Anya, and Retvenko mentions that another Grecian who was had a different ability was taken the other night and did not come back. And now Anya's been taken. And says it in this sort of sinister way, like she's probably not coming back either. I don't know what they're doing to them, but obviously whatever it is, they aren't coming back to their life like it was before, if they're alive at all. So Jost is a little bit flipped out by this. And when they go to the boathouse, he seems a little relieved to see that Anya's there. And she's behind a pane of glass, and he thinks that she's waving, but it turns out that it's mirrored, so she can't even see him. And they're all wondering, what the hell she's doing here, because there's nobody injured for her to be healing. So there's a little boy, and there's a guard in the room, and the guard is assigned to cut this boy's arm, and Anya must heal it. She does. She touches his arm, and it heals up as if it weren't even there. I like the detail that not only does the cut itself heal, but the blood disappears. That's something that I always think about, So this scene is really harsh because they're just kind of playing, this little boy is being used in this really gross way and has been paid or will be paid, but it's obvious that they just either snatched him off the street or bribed him in and didn't tell him what he was going to be doing. You know what? The first time that she heals it, when she touches him, she wipes away the excess blood with a handkerchief. That's not actually, it doesn't disappear. And when the boy asks, was that magic? She says, of a sort. The same magic your own body works when given time and a bit of bandage. The boy looked almost disappointed. So then Hode, who I think is outside of the room behind the glass as well, and communicating via like a speaker, says, "Good, now the parem." And nobody in this room, other than Jost and the guard who's dealing with Anya, knows what parem is at this point. It's a drug, as we find out later, that is sort of like version of another stimulant drug, but on steroids. It's way more intense and has different effects. And the effects would be fatal if you weren't one of the Grisha. So they have her take this drug, it's a powder, and then do her healing. They cut the boy again. And when she takes it, she's like sort of has a moment where she's like really high and really loving it. And we find out later this shit is super addictive, and it takes one time and you have this craving for it again. So that's awesome. So Anya, this time when they're like, okay, heal the boy, all she has to do is flick her fingers. She doesn't have to touch him. She's not even really paying attention. And not only does it heal, but this is the part where the blood lifts away and just disappears. Like this, what she was able to do before, as she said, was healing that the body would do anyway, but she's doing it sort of, accelerated. This that she does is magic. It's like straight up magic. Both of them are clearly magic, but one of them feels more impressive apparently than the other. I feel like both are impressive, but that's just me. And then they want to see what would happen if they cut off this little boy's thumb and had her try to heal that. And Anya is not on board, folks. She ain't here for this shit at all. And she discovers she can just go because she can turn to the guard, tell him, shoot the glass, which I couldn't hear that in the audiobook and not think of Hans Gruber. I'm sorry. But she tells the guard to shoot the glass, and the guard, with this like slack-eyed expression, turns and shoots it without a second's hesitation. And as everybody's starting to like flood into the room to stop her, she says, wait. Everyone stops dead. And from Jost's POV, we see that his mind has gone like very blank. And he knows he needs to wait for something, and he's excited about it. He's anticipating it, but he just has to wait. So he is. Meanwhile, Anya calmly collects this little boy who is about to be fucking mutilated by these psychopaths and walks out the door and leaves them there. And we find out later they stay there. Just stay there. This is some Legion shit, guys. I don't know if you've been watching the second season, but at least their teeth aren't chattering. And yeah, they stay there until they die. Hode, who was like the guy in command here, the one who owned all of the servants, he is affected and gets like taken off to this like, estate to live out the rest of his days. But he isn't back at all. He's just sort of in this perpetual state of anticipation and waiting. So that's that. And we find out later that Jost died. Like, they're all slowly dying because they're starving to death and they're just shitting their pants. Like, it's a stench in there when they finally go and see them later. And it's just boss as hell. This is a badass scene. Seriously. Like, what a way to start the book. She just gets up, grabs the kid, tells all these assholes, nope, and leaves. They weren't ready, clearly. And they had all the guards there because they figured anything that she did was going to have to be an effect on a physical body. They didn't know that it was possible to infiltrate people's minds. This isn't something that any of the Grisha are able to do, evidently. But yeah, I'm just like, that's what you get, guys, for experimenting and having absolutely no idea what's going to happen. Holy shit. But the thing is, it's a double-edged sword because she's able to just get up and leave. But we know after we see what's his face later when he has the meeting, Kaz, he is looking at this little boy who's hooked, and the kid is sick. Like, looks like a corpse, is sweating and shaking and undernourished, and just, he's an addict, you know? So while Anya has this really badass moment here, she's going to pay for it. And that's a shame. So that's that. Let's go to Inej. Inej is also known by the name the Wraith. She is what would we call her? Assassin feels like it doesn't quite cover it, does it? But I guess that is what she is. And she's like Assassin's Creed type assassin, where she, like, you know, climbs up the sides of buildings and manages to, like, sneak up on folks without them hearing her in a way that feels a little supernatural. Even Kaz later is like, he doesn't understand how she's able to not only not make a sound, but she doesn't leave a scent. And he can't really understand how that's possible. I don't know how it is either. Inej has not shared her secret with me, if she ever does. And Inej is... So this is part of, like, the exchange. The descriptions of all of this feels, you know, obviously very, like, old European. And the descriptions of a lot of the names and names of places are all sounding vaguely German to me. And the experimentation on people feels really Nazi-ish. So I've kind of placed these folks in Nazi, like, in that box for right now until I'm told otherwise. And she is coming to a meetup that Kaz is going to be having. He's taking his two dudes in with him, Jesper and Big Bolliger, and they are going to meet up with another, like, crime boss. And I love this so much. So Kaz, I thought I should, like, there's no description in any of this about how old he is. It describes him. Kaz shook his head, dark hair glinting in the lamplight. He was a collection of hard lines and tailored edges, sharp jaw, lean build, wool coat snug across his shoulders. Yes and no, he said in his rock-salt rasp. I, until the next chapter, think Kaz is like 50-something. I'm thinking he got where he is over the course of many years. He has been at this game a while, and here comes this, like, young upstart trying to upset the apple cart, and Kaz isn't going to have it because he is where he is and as old as he is for a fucking reason. Well, guess what? Kaz is 7-fucking-teen, which maybe time doesn't run the same way there as it does in our world, but I think it does. Because Inej is older than Kaz, and yet she's, you know, taking orders from him and doesn't resent it at all. Like, everybody seems to just accept the fact that Kaz is boss, and that he, except for, you know, the one guy who totally betrays him. But I digress. So I was just shocked to find out how young he is. So yeah, Kaz goes in with his two dudes, and Inej goes in. She joins them in another way. He's going to be meeting up with this dude while she sneaks up the side of the building and climbs in to check on some of the other guards. Because he has a suspicion that maybe the dude he's meeting with is going to have bribed the guards over to his side, which... It's so, like, he plays it like he has no idea. Maybe. Who knows? Better be careful, though. And it turns out that fucking... He knows for a fact. He is so ahead of this. So, Giels is the name of the guy that he's meeting with. And when they go in, Inej is pretty sure they're walking into a trap. She just has a feeling. And... keeps trying to warn Kaz that this is all a bad idea. They need to go. It's one of those, like, why won't you listen to the woman who clearly has a sixth sense about these things? And then you find out, like, he's not listening because he's ahead of her. He knows already. He's got this figured out. And she says later, like, you almost died, Kaz. And I'm like, did he? Because, I mean, I guess he did, but it really seemed like he had that shit on lock. So I wasn't worried. It was a great scene. So yeah, what winds up happening is that Giles has come in there and he's planning on, essentially, there's a dock, almost a whole bay, I think it is, that had been really run down. Nobody really even used it anymore. And Gaz got up, you see, I'm calling him Gaz. Kaz came up with the money to refurbish it, basically. And, you know, had it all redone and opened it, and it became this hotspot, not just for ships to come in and unload, but also like brothels and casinos and, you know, restaurants, all of this kind of thing. So basically, it's like the playground for thieves. Like, you come up there and you have a good time and don't realize that you're being like chivied off to certain areas where you're going to get totally played and lose all your money, or get rolled by one of the prostitutes, or have somebody duck into your ship while you're having dinner and they'll take some of your shit. And they're careful, you know, but yeah. So he's got control of this because he built it, basically. But technically, despite doing that, it's like public property. So Giles is coming in here trying to be like, oh, it's for all of us, and I'm totally going to start taking shit from you. So what are you going to do about it? And apparently there has already been this huge shipment of the tamer version of the drug that we saw Anya take stolen. And Kaz is pretty positive that it was Giles that stole it, which is sort of what sets this whole thing off in terms of him figuring out that Big Bolliger is the bad guy in this scenario. So there comes a great scene where Giles really thinks he has one over on Kaz and signals for the guard to shoot Kaz, and instead the guard shoots Big Bolliger. And as soon as he did that, I was like, oh, fuck, he betrayed them. But I didn't realize that he had, like, betrayed them right there in that moment. I figured it was something that he had done earlier, and it was that too. But also, the reveal that he betrayed them comes because they've all been patted down. They're not supposed to be armed. And yet, Giles pulls out a fucking pistol that there's no way Bolliger would have missed. So he let him hold on to that in the event that the guards weren't enough to take Kaz down. And that's the moment where Jesper, is that his name, is like, oh, motherfucker. Because at first, when Bolliger goes down, Jesper's like, what is wrong with you, Kaz? Hello, this guy is fucking dying. We need to do something. How are you so calm right now? And then he sees Giles pull the gun, and he's like, oh, you fuck. And I think it's you fuck, not just to Big Bolliger. I think he's saying that to Kaz as well. So then there's the one other guard, which Kaz had taken care of the first one and made sure that that guy was on their side. The other one he had not, and was depending on Inej to catch up with that one. And she does, like, in the barest nick of time. And manages to keep him from shooting Kaz as well. And this too, like, in the end, she just lets him go, and he flees, like, peeing his pants, super grateful to be alive. So Giles, in this moment, is humiliated, shown up, and not only did this overall plan not go well, and now he looks like a fool, but he also spent a fortune bribing these guards, and getting the information about who was going to be on duty tonight and all of this stuff. Like, everything was riding on this one deal going through. And so now he's not only stupid looking and, like, just his reputation on the street probably ruined forever, but also super broke. And apparently he has his own people to report to. I kind of was under the impression that he was on the level of Gaz, but just for another street crew. But he is, I think a second or third in command. So he has some folks that he's going to have to report back to with his organization, which is called the Black Tips. And they're not going to be happy that all of this money went completely down the drain. And he's still thinking that maybe he'll just shoot Kaz because this guy humiliated him and he wants to get revenge. But then Kaz pulls his trump card, which is, we know that you have a girl. We know exactly where she lives. I'll describe the street. I'll describe which house is hers and that she has geraniums in the window boxes. And we have people who are ready to set the place on fire if you don't let me walk out of here alive. And you can live another day and you can figure out how to get back at me at some other point. But for tonight, we'll move on if you just stop with this nonsense. And Giles agrees to do it, but Kaz still whacks him with his cane, which I think the cane is part of why I assumed that Kaz was older. I was thinking of him as doing one of those Gandalf the Grey things where he's or Gandalf the White at that point. You wouldn't part an old man from his walking stick. But that little added humiliation of whacking the guy after he'd already capitulated, kind of satisfying. Totally unnecessary and maybe adding a little bit of hurt that you don't need at this point in terms of the guy's ego, but also really great. And Inej is mad. She's feeling the same way Jesper is, I think, which is, I can't believe that you didn't let us in on this. I can't believe that you played it so close. I had barely gotten to that guard by the time that you were talking about how, oh, he's not going to shoot me. So that was kind of almost just luck. And also, you almost died and they're going to come after you. And, this might be a temporary victory for you, but I wouldn't take it too far. I wouldn't get too comfortable about it. And in the end, when she says I wouldn't get too comfortable about it, it turns out that Kaz is doesn't quite hear her in that moment, but later seems to think that maybe she was right, because Kaz winds up taking a walk alone after this sort of celebratory party that they all have. And he gets jumped and he thinks to himself that it's because he was resting on his laurels too much. And he was he was high on his victory, so he wasn't paying enough attention. So somebody gets the drop on him. I think that maybe that is partly true, but also the kid who jumps him has fucking superpowers. So really you aren't going to be prepared for that. He walks through a wall. There's only so much paranoia that can prepare you for somebody walking through a wall and jabbing you with a syringe. So then we go to Kaz's POV. And Kaz is, first of all, he has a chat with Inej where she kind of reprimands him. And I really like this combination of things that he feels about her, where he depends on her and he does respect her. He isn't sure if he should say that he trusts her, but you get the sense that he kind of does. And also there's a bit of friction there because she believes in the gods and is a little, I wouldn't say pious, almost more superstitious, I feel like. And he kind of mocks that. And she finds that not only it's not even that it's blasphemous or just in bad taste. She finds it to be just so arrogant that it's really unattractive and gonna bite him in the ass at some point. And she's doing that thing where she's watching somebody and already seeing the comeuppance that they're going to get and kind of pitying them, which is one of those infuriating things that people who have religion or beliefs do sometimes, where they give you this pitying, oh, you just don't understand look. So I like Inej as a character, but I appreciated Kaz getting irritated with her. So Kaz, when she leaves, gets jabbed with a syringe, and then he wakes up and he's chained to a chair, And he's in some guy's house that's like obviously very wealthy. And he can tell by what the dude is wearing which house he is with. He is a Van Eck, a mercher. And Van Eck is a pious man. And is a very like upright citizen. And he kidnaps Kaz even though he's intending to like make Kaz an offer and ask him a favor. It's a real like, I get why. Because he says when Kaz is like, what the fuck are you thinking with this? He's like, well, it was partially a demonstration. But like, you could have approached this another way and maybe not wound up with a letter opener at your throat. Just saying. Clearly, this is a man who doesn't appreciate who he has in his presence at the moment, because he puts Kaz in an easily escapable situation in Kaz's view, and does not seem to realize that. He just doesn't realize that. So Kaz is sitting here being humiliated by this dude who clearly feels like he's better than Kaz is and looks down on him and he calls him a stripling from the barrel, and that he won't argue ethics with him because Kaz is doing that thing where he's like, listen, I might rob people and I might kill occasionally, but also you definitely like employ people that you know have a, I think, 25% chance of dying, like 20%, I think, on one of your voyages. So you may reframe that all you want, but we both take on risk and we both use people. And I don't entirely agree with Kaz's assessment, of course. I think there is a certain like point of responsibility. These people signed up to be on ships knowing that there were risks, and that was their decision. They made a choice. People don't make a choice to be robbed. That's not really the same, but it's fine. So he says, I have a proposition for you, the council does. Does the merchant council begin all negotiations with a beating? Consider it a warning and a demonstration. And this is where he remembers the shape in the alley, the way it had appeared and disappeared like a ghost. Geordie. He gave himself an internal shake. Not Geordie, you podge. Focus. Who's Geordie, guys? What's going on there? Like, clearly somebody died because of him. I'm going to go with like a little brother. And he feels super guilty and wants to like make it up to this person. So Geordie could be a girl's name, but I'm going to go with a boy. And I'm going to say that Geordie is a relative, somebody who depended on him. If not an actual blood relative, then somebody that he saw as family. And he let this person down and they died. And now he's like feeling literally haunted by that. So Van Eck is asking him about what he does and the fact that he blackmails people, and asks him how he gets his information. And we get this lovely moment of, how do you get your information, Mr. Brecker? You might say, I'm a lockpick. You must be a very gifted one. I am indeed. Kaz leaned back slightly. You see, every man is a safe, a vault of secrets and longings. Now there are those who take the brute's way, but I prefer a gentler approach. The right pressure applied at the right moment in the right place. It's a delicate thing. Do you always speak in metaphors, Mr. Brecker? Kaz smiled. It's not a metaphor. And this is when he jumps Van Eck. That's pretty good. Props on that one. This is all very cinematic. Every scene so far, I've just been like, ooh, I'm seeing this in my mind. And like the perspective of the cameras and the way this would all go. Like, I really enjoyed the introductions to these characters. So finally, boy walks back through the wall, and Kaz is like, at this point, really flipping out. Like, thinks maybe that what was in the syringe is like a hallucinogen, and he's been drugged, or else that this is some sort of trick, like an illusion. And Jorda is the name of the stimulant drug. Jorda Parem is something different. and this kid is on it. So there's a moment in the earlier chapter where Inej is thinking about how much Kaz likes little mysteries. And there was an official, I think an ambassador, who was murdered in a bathroom with no vents, no windows, no way of getting in and out. He walked in, he closed the door behind him and locked it. There were like people out in the hallway outside. His guards, there was nobody going in or out. He locked the door. And yet, when he didn't come out and they finally broke the door down, he was dead with a knife in his back. And they've been thinking it over and over and trying to figure out how that could even happen. And nobody has an answer. And when Kaz sees this kid and gets explained how this can work, he's like, oh shit, that's what it is. Fuck. So in the end, they sit back down again and wind up having like a conversation with Kaz kind of on equal footing because now he has a pistol and he has his cane back. But yeah, there's a different, like, I'm trying to find an exact moment where the different types of Grisha are described, because they talk about a tide maker. And I feel like tide maker is like a subset of one of the three, if I'm not mistaken, but I don't remember how that goes. An ordinary tide maker can control currents, summon water or moisture from the air or a nearby source. They manage the tides in our harbor. But under the influence of Jurda Parem, a tide maker can alter his own state from solid to liquid to gas and back again, and do the same with other objects, even a wall. Which is crazy pants. And I love it. I love weird powers like this. Turn yourself into a gas. It seems real, like, I'm saying dangerous as if it's like, oh, you don't want to. But I'm thinking, like, what if somebody had a giant fan and they just blew you apart? Then what? What happens? So, yeah, this drug works on Grishas, but it does kill regular people. So the fabricator had turned a piece of lead into gold, and he lets Kaz take the gold to get tested. And Kaz, at the same time that he's like, nice, some gold, is like, yeah, but you literally could have just had a hunk of gold and told me somebody turned this into gold from lead. Like, I can't believe I'm not watching this happen in front of my eyes. But he did just see a kid walk through a wall. So why isn't the gold possible? And I'm not blaming the writer here. I'm not blaming Kaz as a character here either. This is just something that I always find frustrating with people, that they'll like be watching something impossible in front of their eyes, and then they deny that the other impossible thing is possible. Hey, maybe you just need to reassess what you think is possible. Maybe that's the problem here. So it turns out that Boyul Bayur is the man who invented this drug. And Van Eck and the rest of the Merchants Council are all very concerned at the fact that apparently there's no order anymore. If these Grishas take this drug, they can just create gold, which fucks all kinds of shit up. They can just make things appear or disappear. They can, essentially, the worldwide economy would be thrown into utter chaos because, supply and demand wouldn't be the way it works anymore. The supply would be provided by Grishas, and the demand could come from literally everyone, and apparently they could do it. So it's a really... I kind of love this because this isn't like some huge worldwide, like, we all know that this is super dangerous. It's a Merchants Council who's got a very zeroed in fear because of this. That's not even about, like, is this right or wrong to do? Is the drug dangerous to Grishas? Is this an immoral thing that they've just been testing it on them? Is this something that could be weaponized in this, like, there's no huge sort of, like, I'm so used to, like, the military's after us because they want to turn us into human weapons, that kind of thing. And this is such a small, practical point of view that I was just sort of tickled by it because it feels like it makes complete sense. But it is really surprising. They want him to kidnap Bolyor Bayor. Apparently this dude is a little bit like under siege at the moment and needed asylum. But now he is going to be put on trial at the ice court. And apparently that's like Azkaban. It's like, what's the one in the Muggle world, guys? The one that they made that movie about. The ice court is not someplace that you just break people out of. So the fact that he's asking Kaz for his help is basically like, how much can I pay you to tempt you into dying? Maybe. Almost definitely. And it turns out that number is 30 million Kruger, which he offers 5 to start out with. And yeah, it turns into 30. He says 20. Kaz doesn't argue with him, but then later says 30, and he's like, we said 20. He's like, no, you said 20. I say 30 because I'm going to have to split it with people who know they're going on a suicide mission. And he makes it seem like we all value our lives. Don't you know that? But he does know that to a degree, the folks that he works with don't value their lives the same way because they don't have a lot to live for. So getting the crew together that he needs might not actually be that hard. And he also says, Kaz's share of the scrub would be enough to change everything, to finally put into motion the dream he'd had since he'd first crawled out of a cold harbor with revenge burning a hole in his heart. His debt to Geordie would be paid at last. So yeah, I'm going to say Geordie drowned. But this whole thing is just incredibly dangerous. And also the drug is slowly killing this kid, Mika, who came through the wall. He coughs and Mika's got blood when he coughs on his sleeve. So they also have their pause where he shows him the effects of Anya on all of the people all of the guards who were in the boathouse. And that's part of how Kaz is able to muscle him into 30 million, because he's like, yeah, you're real desperate. Obviously you have nowhere else to turn and don't know what to do. So I know that I can kind of name my own price. Tough. So then what about the healer? Who? You said you gave the drug to a Grisha from each order. Mika's a tide maker. He's your Ethraelnik. Okay, here's the description. He's your Ethraelnik. The fabricator who mocked up that gold was a materialnik. So what happened to the corporalnik, the healer? So etherealnik, I'm going to go with it. They manipulate, elements. Fabricator deals with actual solid objects. Corporalnik deals with bodies. That was what I was looking for. Finally found it. So, yeah. Then that's when he leads him into the thing that he sees all the guys just standing there staring and realizes that he can name his own price. And I think that's the end of that's the end of it. And him just being really excited that now he has to go put this crew together. But he seems to be willing to risk it all. He knows that. And I like the detail that Hode, who was in charge of this whole operation when Anya got out, we find out later that she ordered him to cut the thumb from his hand, which is pretty great. I think it's, let's see, he suppressed a shiver, blah, blah, blah. What happened to Hode? She commanded him to open the door, and when he did, she ordered him to cut the thumb from his hand. We only know how it all happened because a kitchen boy was present. So he was a kitchen boy that they brought in and offered money to have him cut up. Jesus Christ. Oh, that poor kid. So, yeah, that's everything. And I'm just super into this. I also like the fact that for some reason, Kaz wears gloves and there's not an explanation given about that. there is a moment where, Van Eck is like, well, can you tell me why? Because I've heard lots of stories. And he's like, because they were stained with blood, because they were covered in scars, because he had claws and not fingers, because he was part demon, because his touch burned like brimstone. A single brush of his bare skin caused your flesh to wither and die. Pick one, Kaz said as he vanished into the night, thoughts already turning to 30 million Kruger and the crew he'd need to help him get it. They're all true enough. I feel like the gloves are penitence for whatever happened to Geordie. So yeah, guys, so that's the end. But yeah, I really liked this, and I'm hoping somebody else picks up the next, couple chapters. And I do like the audiobook too. Though I think there was a mix up with my speaker, because I thought that it was recorded weirdly, but it was my speaker. Because when I put my headphones on, it was fine. And yeah, the voice acting on it is done really well. And, I don't know. There's, audiobooks are a real hit or miss thing. Like, they can be awful. And, it's always nice for me to find one that's good, that, especially when it's for an assignment, so that I can listen, but still be able to be cooking or doing whatever. So yeah. And Jill says, if no one else does, I will. Haha. Although not this month. I bought a new MacBook today. Ooh, smancy. But yeah, if you are able to, that'd be awesome if somebody else is able to, but I will let it sit. And if it's, takes a while for the next one to get booked, I'll reread the first 3 chapters just to refresh myself before I go on to the next ones. That's what I did with Parable of the Sower, because it had been a while. So yeah, guys, thank you so much, Jill, for commissioning this. It was super fun. It's an unexpected pleasure how much I've been enjoying everything for Spoil Me. You guys have good taste. God bless. I know eventually it will happen that somebody will pick something that I don't like, but so far, so good. So, audiobooks are nice because then you know how the names are pronounced. Arguably, Rachel, because I've heard that some of the pronunciations for Song of Ice and Fire, he says Daenerys, which is why Miles said Daenerys all the time, which is not correct, and I will never say that. So, but yeah, there's, mostly it can help. And let's see, audiobooks are nice, and then names to pronounce. I'm so glad it wasn't me. I personally pronounce many words differently. That may be because I'm German. Yeah, maybe. So yeah, and I think it was it Rachel that said that she thinks it might be Dutch? Kirch feels like a Dutch-German mashup. Straat is legitimately street in Dutch. Straub would be German. Straub has got a letter in it that I don't recognize that looks like a cursive B. But it's a double S. Oh, okay. Interesting. Huh. Well, yeah. So the Nazi thing I'm feeling a little bit on point with then. And the killing of the ambassador, it all felt very World War II-ish, were the beginnings of what happened with that. I don't know. I'm interested to see how this all works out. But all right, guys. Well, I'm going to have to wrap this up because right after this, I have the Sunshine broadcast. So hopefully you guys can join me for that one because this next section for Sunshine was really good. And after that, right after Sunshine, I'm going to be doing my broadcast on Pan's Labyrinth, which was commissioned by Melanie. So, it's 10 p.m. where you are, Jill. Yeah, I don't blame you. Go to bed. All right. So yeah, I am super busy today, Melanie. It's a packed day. And then Monday, which is Labor Day, I have 3 back-to-back on Monday also. So, yeah, I'm going to have to figure out how to make a 15-minute break in between what I've scheduled, but I can't figure out how to do that on Calendly yet. I've tried to figure it and I can't quite manage. So yeah, we'll see. But thank you all so much for coming. Again, thank you, Jill, for commissioning. Super fun. And I will include the link in the show notes for anybody who's listening and who wants to pick up a copy. I really recommend it. It's just very well written. So I will see you all hopefully soon with the next 3 chapters. And until then, toodaloo, motherfuckers.
was an Unspoiled Network podcast.